Welcome to another 4-Minute Friday. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to everybody who watched last week's video, which was the first one of February, and thank you to everybody who posted questions underneath that one, because that's given me a few questions to pick for tonight's video. So thank you to everybody who watched that. We've had some great questions and I obviously can't go through them all, but I've got 4 here that I'm going to go through for you in detail, and it's just another opportunity where I can try and help some of you out with your fishing related questions. That's a brilliant question, Richard, and I've got to be absolutely honest with you, it's way too big and in-depth to go into in this 4-minute slot. So I will put a video together just about waggler fishing. In a nutshell, the longer the waggler, the further out you want to go, but the longer the waggler generally reflects the depth of the water that you're fishing in. So the deeper the water, the longer the waggler, okay? Just like if it's shallower water, that's when you fish with a shorter waggler, okay? So that's kind of summarises that bit very, very briefly. Loaded wagglers are great. These are loaded, they've got all the weight there. They're great for when you don't want much shot down the line. So if you're just going to have a few drop shots, whether they're number 8s, number 10s, if you're fishing for fish on the drop, then these are ideal for that. But wagglers without weights in the bottom, they're the ones that gives you the flexibility to put lots of weight down the rig. So if you're fishing in deeper water or the wind's bad and you want some stability, then that might be when you use a normal waggler without the weight at the bottom, and that is when you might want to incorporate a bodied waggler as well, because that body will allow you to carry extra weight. But I will put a video together for YouTube on this channel which goes much more in depth about waggler choice. Great question, Dominic. You know, and in my experience, generally the clearer the water on a river, the more likely I will use a maggot feeder, okay? Certainly if you're after roach, dace, perch, a maggot feeder will catch anything, because maggots, fish will eat, all fish will eat maggots. But generally for me, in my experience, the clearer the water, the more likely I'll use a maggot feeder, okay? So if it's really clear, maggot feeder. If there's colour in the water, that is when we go down the ground bait and open-ended feeder route. Brilliant question, Paul, and it's something I've been asked a lot over the last 5 or 6 years on this channel. I've got all my hands up and say to you, I have experimented with feeder links now on and off for 5 or 6 years, but I will be absolutely honest with you and say now exclusively, certainly for the last 2 years, I haven't fished with a feeder link. I haven't seen any sort of benefit in my fishing for a feeder link, okay? The times when I've experimented with it is when, you know, there might be occasions when I might be missing bites, or you're after a different sort of species and you can't quite read your bites right, or if I've been missing bites and indications, then I've tried it just to see if that's compensated it. But now, over the last 2 years, I've changed my rig accordingly, and I just don't feel the need for a feeder link at all in my fishing. But even within the England camp, there are some anglers that love feeder links and use them all the time, but there are some anglers that don't use them. So it's very much a personal thing. But for me, I just use a snap link swivel that's just simply running up and down the rig. I don't miss bites, I don't get entangles, but I think a lot of it is the way that you set your tip and the way that you read your bites as well. So for me personally, I just don't use them at all now, Paul. Jeff, that is a really big question, and you know, to summarise it, basically yes, we always have some sort of a plan. Now when we talk about match tactics, you know, it's something that obviously could be a video, it could even be a series on its own. However, you've got to have some sort of a starting point. Now for me, there are 2 different sorts of match plans. One of them is one where it's very regimented, it's very structured, and that tends to be on a venue where, if I know it very well, if I know the venue very well, if I'm bang up to speed on how it's fishing and I'm very in touch with it, then that might be when I have a really structured, formal match plan, you know, and they are brilliant matches to be part of. However, most of the matches that I fish, because I go from venue to venue to venue, I haven't always got the luxury of up-to-date information. I generally have a loose match plan. So that basically means that you'll have a starting point, you'll have an idea of where you're going to go to next, and you might have an idea where you'll be in the middle of the match, and you might have an idea of where you want to finish the match. And that's all well and good, that's brilliant. You've got to have some sort of a plan there, alright? However, lots of the matches that I fish, especially in winter, I'll have a starting point, but then the next part of the plan will be based on what's happened around me. It will be based on what's happened in my swim, you know, because sometimes you know, you might not be catching many fish. You might have only caught a couple of fish after 2 hours. However, if no one else around you's caught any fish, then there's no reason for you really to change. You know, you're kind of in front, you're doing something that's right. However, on the flip side of that, if you've got 2 fish after 2 hours, but them either side of you have got 12, then you need to change something. You know, and the chances are you're probably going to change to something that they're doing, or very similar to what they're doing, because yes, you've got your information from what's happened in your match. You know what's happened in your match, you know what you fed, you know where you fed, you know how many bites you've had, you know that. But obviously 2 hours into a match, you know what they've done as well, either side of you. You know where they've caught, how big the fish are, you know how frequently they're casting, you know how often they're catching, and all that sort of stuff. So that is why a lot of the matches that we fish now, you will start with your A game, but it could quite easily end up on a B game, C game, D game, but it won't necessarily be something that you envisaged happening a few days ago when you were thinking about the match. It could quite easily be a reactive change to your match based on what's happened around you. I don't know if I've overcomplicated that, but it basically means that yes, we always have a starting point. If you know the venue well, then that's when you can be a little bit more structured. However, if you don't know the venue very well, then just start with an open mind. You know, you've got to start somewhere, and start by easing your way into it. You know, don't go piling bait in here, there and everywhere, because then if it is wrong what you've done, then you've still got, you know, your swim, and there's lots of other changes that you can make based on what's happening around you, if that makes sense. I hope I've touched on those okay. Like I say, I'm going to follow this one up with a video just about waggler fishing. So that's a great question, that one, Richard. It's not something I've really tackled before, but there are so many elements to waggler fishing and the actual design of wagglers and why they're designed differently. Then, and you know, there are various applications for fishing with each style of waggler. Then that definitely warrants a video on its own. So I will upload that for you. So if you don't want to miss out on that video, and if you don't want to miss out on any of these, don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't done already. And please post your questions below for next week's 4 Minute Friday. So thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a great weekend.